Assalamu alaikum everyone, this is Abdullah Khalil and this is the platform where you learn O-level, A-level and IGCSE biology of all UK boards. The topic that we are doing today is classification. All the living organisms in the world are classified into groups and subgroups. This topic is from IGCSE and O-level biology. The first thing that we do before starting the chapter is to look at the key learning objectives provided by the board. This is from the IGCSE curriculum. So the topics that we are looking at here is characteristics of living organisms. These are the learning objectives here. Then we have concepts and uses of classification system. These are the topics. On the left side we see the core topics, and on the right side we have the supplement topics. That means for the students that are appearing for extended examination. Now once we have skimmed through the topics, the learning objectives that we have to learn, we go to the first topic of this lesson. Characteristics of living organisms. Now, what are the characteristics that are used to identify a living organism? There are 7 characteristics, and this is the best mnemonic that you can learn, which will help you remember these 7 characteristics. So all those things that have these 7 characteristics are considered as living organisms. Everything else is considered as non-living. What are those 7 characteristics? Number 1, all the organisms should be able to move. All the organisms should be able to respire to produce energy. All the organisms are sensitive. That means they're able to sense the heat. They're able to feel the cold, the hunger, the thirst. So they are sensitive to their internal and external stimuli. They are able to grow over a period of time, and they are able to reproduce. That means they're able to produce organisms of their own kind. They are able to excrete the nitrogenous wastes that are produced within their bodies. And finally, they eat food. They do nutrition. So these are the 7 characteristics that help us identify a living organism. If something has these 7 characteristics, we will consider that as a living organism. But if something is missing any one of these characteristics, that thing is not considered as living organism. That is clarified. Now let's move on to the classification that we do. In the classification, we have the groups. The smallest of the groups, in which we have all the organisms that are similar to each other, is called species. And we have in total 7 groups. So the smallest groups that has all the organisms similar to each other is called species. For example, all the dogs are placed in the same species. All the cats are placed in the same species, no matter which breed they belong to. All the human beings are placed in the same species because they are similar to each other. What do we look at? We look at the morphology, we look at the anatomy, and we look at the biochemistry. So by definition, species is the group of organisms that are similar in morphology, anatomy, biochemistry. They are able to interbreed with each other and produce fertile offsprings. So when 2 organisms of the same species interbreed, they produce fertile offsprings. For example, 2 organisms, let's say 2 donkeys, a male and a female, they interbreed with one another. They will produce an organism of their own kind, another donkey of the same species, and that donkey will grow up to have kids of its own. So these organisms are producing fertile offsprings. But let's say if 2 different species would interbreed, let's say a horse and a donkey would interbreed, they would produce a mule, and mule is the dead end. Mule is infertile. It is unable to produce kids of its own. Okay, this is how we define species. The next step is to name the species. Once the similar organisms have been classified, have been grouped in the same species, they are given a scientific name. This naming system is called the binomial system because each scientific name given to each species has 2 names. One is the generic name and the other one is the specific name. Okay. For example, the human beings, they are called Homo sapiens. Homo sapiens is the scientific name according to binomial system of human beings. And there is a particular specific way of writing this name. When you are writing the complete name, you have to make sure that the first letter, the first alphabet of the first word is capital, and the first alphabet of the second word is small. So H is capital in Homo and S is small in sapiens. Or if you're writing the abbreviated form, you can just write H dot sapiens, but in that case, you will have to underline these words. And these are the rules. If it is in typed form, it must be italic. Okay, H. sapiens must be italic, not underlined but italic. We have Musca domestica, which is the scientific name of housefly. Then we have Brassica campestris, for example. It is the scientific name of mustard plant. We have Rana trigrina for frog. We have Rosa indica for rose. There are different species, and each of the species has its own scientific name. The next step with the classification is that we have millions of species in the world. Now the species that are interrelated, that are similar, they are grouped together in a bigger group called genus. Then the similar genus are placed in a bigger group, which is families. Then they are placed in a bigger group. Similar families are placed in a bigger group called orders. So if we start from the top, we have kingdoms, and then kingdoms are divided into phylums. Then phylums are divided into classes. Classes are divided into orders, and then families, genus, and finally the species, which has only one type of organism. Kingdom is the largest group and species is the smallest group. To remember the sequence, I'll give you this wonderful mnemonic: keep pond clean or fish gets sick. 7 groups. Keep is for kingdom, pond, phylum, P is for phylum. Then we have class, C is for class, O order, and F is for family, G is for genus, S is for species. This mnemonic will help you remember the sequence of all the groups of classification. This branch which studies the classification is called taxonomy, by the way. In total, we have 5 kingdoms in the world. We have kingdom prokaryotes, animals, plants, fungi, and protoctista. The basic difference between the first one and the rest, that's why I have listed it in this way. The first one has the prokaryotic cell. If you have the basic knowledge of the cells, you know what prokaryotic cell is, what eukaryotic cell is. In simple words or in a single line, I can say that prokaryotic cells are the ones that do not have membrane-bounded organelles or membrane-bounded nucleus. Eukaryotic cells are the ones that have membrane-bounded organelles and membrane-bounded nucleus. That's the basic difference. That's the main difference. Then we have the basis of classification. What do we look at when we are classifying organisms? How do we know that this particular organism should be placed in this particular group? We look at morphology, the overall form and shape of an organism. Then anatomy, the detailed body structure. Biochemistry, the compounds and the characteristics of those compounds, specifically DNA. The study of DNA with the modern genetics, with modern microscopy, has actually revolutionized classification. Now we can be very precise, we can be very clear with classification because we know the sequence of nitrogenous bases. DNA is the genetic material of living organisms. So if we know the sequence of this genetic material, it would be very easy to classify this particular living organism, even if we just have one cell. Because the DNA sequence is different for all the individuals in the world. Even the same families, the same genus, the same species, and even siblings, even the parents and offsprings, they will have different DNA sequences. The base sequence of the similar organisms is very similar. So how to use DNA in classification? If you just look at this example, the second and the third one, they have same base sequence. The only difference is this. Now these are nitrogenous bases. A, G, C, T are the nitrogenous bases. Okay, and in a particular sequence they are arranged in all living organisms. That's what the genome sequence or the DNA sequence is. The sequence of these nitrogenous bases. You can see the second one and the third one, they have the same sequence, except the second last here is T, thymine, and the second last here is adenine, A. Okay, because they have very similar sequence, they are placed in the same genus. As I said in the scientific name, the first name is the name of the genus. The generic name is actually the name of the genus. So they are placed in the same genus, Brachynes. Moving forward, now we talk about the kingdoms that we have, prokaryotes, the basic qualifications of being in that kingdom. We are going to discuss the basic characteristics, the main characteristics of all these kingdoms. So prokaryotes are the ones that have prokaryotic cell. They do not have membrane-bounded organelles, membrane-bounded nucleus. When you look at the structure of bacteria, a simple bacterium will have a DNA, main DNA, which is present in the center. It may have extra DNA, which is called plasmid. It will also have ribosomes, which are a bit different from the ribosomes that are present in human beings or eukaryotic organisms. Ribosomes are very small granular structures which are present in the cytoplasm. So other than the cell wall, cell membrane, these are the structures that you will generally see in the bacterium. Secondly, the cell wall is made up of a substance called peptidoglycan. Peptide is for protein, glycan is for carbohydrate. So it is a substance made up of proteins and carbohydrates. The bacterial cell wall is made up of peptidoglycan. These are the characteristics of prokaryotes. When we look at animals, now animals at a cellular level, they do not have the cell wall. They have a cell membrane. They do not have chloroplast. They do not have a vacuole, a permanent sap vacuole. And animals are heterotrophic. They obtain their heterotrophic means they obtain their food from other organisms. They cannot prepare their own food, and they are multicellular. Example is lion. Then we have kingdom plants. On a cellular level, they have cell walls which are made up of cellulose. They have chloroplasts. They have permanent sap vacuole and other structures that are present in animal cell as well. And their cell wall is made up of a substance called cellulose. It's a carbohydrate. Example could be apple tree, coconut tree, rose plant. Then we have kingdom fungi. Now, fungi have very special characteristics. Initially, in the two kingdom system classification, fungi were considered as plants. But now we know that they're very different from plants and animals and protoctista and prokaryotes. They cannot be placed in any other kingdom, so they have the kingdom of their own. Their body is made up of thread-like structures. Body is called mycelium. The thread-like structure are called singular as hypha, plural as hyphae. And their cell wall is made up of chitin. Example could be mushroom. Now the fungi could obtain their food from dead organic matter. They are called saprotrophs. Okay, saprotrophs. Or sometimes they could be parasitic. That means they cause diseases. They get their food from living organisms. Then lastly, we have kingdom protoctista, which are mostly unicellular. They could be plant-like. That means they can prepare their own food just like plants. Or they could be animal-like. That means they get their food from other organisms. Example could be amoeba. There are other examples. For example, a plant-like protoctist could be algae. And we have paramecium, euglena, the organism that causes malaria, plasmodium, that is also a protoctist. Then we divide the kingdoms into phylums. For kingdom Animalia, we have so many phylums like Echinodermata, Platyhelminthes, Nematoda, but we are going to just learn these two, vertebrates and arthropods. Again, the main characteristics, these are the phylums, okay? These two are the phylums of animals that we are going to study. Vertebrates are the ones that have the vertebral column. All those animals that have vertebral column are placed in this phylum. Arthropods are the ones that have jointed legs and exoskeleton. All those organisms are placed in this phylum. Then these phyla are further divided into their classes. The vertebrates are divided into 5 classes: mammals, birds, reptiles, amphibians, and fish. Mammals are the ones, there are 3 characteristics that you will have to remember for mammals. They give birth, they have body hair, and they have mammary glands. From mammary glands, the name mammal. So they have mammary glands for breastfeeding. They do not lay eggs, they give birth to their young ones, and they have body hair. Example could be human being, a lion, a dog, a cat, a giraffe, an elephant. These are all mammals. Then we have birds. What are the characteristics that come to your mind when you're talking about birds? They have beaks, they have hollow bones, they have feathers, they can fly, they lay eggs with hard shells. Example could be hummingbird. Then we have reptiles, they have rough scales on their body, they crawl like alligator, snake. They also lay eggs but with rubbery shells, okay, like tortoise. Amphibians, the word bi means two. They have 2 lives. They have dual life. They live in water and they live on land. Sometimes they live on land and they go to water to lay their eggs. Their eggs are without shells. Example could be frog or a toad or newt. Then we have fish. Fish are the organisms that have fins for swimming, they have gills for breathing, they live underwater, they can swim, they have red slimy scales on their body. They also lay eggs without the shell. Example, shark. Dolphin is not a fish, dolphin is a mammal. Bat is also a mammal, it's a flying mammal, it's not a bird. Then we look at the classes of arthropods. There are 4 classes. We have insects, arachnids, crustaceans, and myriapods. If we learn it in this order, insects, they have 3 pairs of legs. Arachnids, 4 pairs of legs. Crustaceans, 4 or more pairs of legs. And lastly, we have myriapods, multiple, more than 10 pairs of legs. And furthermore, insects have 3 body parts: head, thorax, and abdomen. Mostly they have wings as well. Sometimes they do not have wings, but mostly they have wings. They have a pair of antennae as well. Example could be butterfly, housefly, etc. Arachnids, they have 2 body parts: cephalothorax and abdomen. They have 2 body parts and they have 4 pairs of legs. Example could be spider, 4 pairs of legs. Crustaceans, chalky exoskeleton, 4 or more pairs of legs. Example, lobster. Example, crab. And they also have gills to breathe, just like fish. Then we have myriapods. The body is segmented. There are so many segments and each segment has its own pair of legs. And they also have a pair of antennae. Example is millipede and centipede. Okay. Now we talk about the plants. The second kingdom. Kingdom plants has 2 main groups: ferns and flowering plants. That's what we are going to study for now. So we have ferns and flowering plants. Ferns are obviously non-flowering. They do not produce flowers. They do not have true leaves. Their leaves are called fronds. And underside their leaves, they have spores. These spores are basically the way that they reproduce. They reproduce through those spores. Okay, they do not reproduce like the traditional flowers would reproduce through the seed. They would have a seed in their fruit and we can plant the seed and the seed will grow into a new plant. Those will be flowering plants. The non-flowering plants, the ferns, underside their fronds, they have spores and they reproduce through these spores. Okay. Flowering plants are further divided into, flowering plants again produce flowers, they have seeds, they reproduce through the seeds. They are further divided into 2 groups. We have monocots and dicots. Single cotyledon in the seed is monocot. 2 cotyledons in the seed is dicot. Monocot also have 3 petals or multiple of 3 petals in their flowers. And they have parallel veins in their leaves. If you see the leaf of a monocot, they will have parallel veins like this. Okay. When you look at the dicot have netted veins, branched veins. The leaf would be something like this. Okay, they have branched veins. Okay, even inside they have small veins. So they have branched veins in their leaves. They have 2 cotyledons in their seeds, and their petals are 4 or 5 or multiple of 4 or 5. For monocots, the examples are corn, grass, onion, etc. And for dicots, the examples are tomato, apple, etc. And this is where we are going to conclude. If you have learned something, please make sure to subscribe to our channel. It is a huge support for us and it just takes a second. And I'll see you again with the next video.